Hello everybody and welcome back to this week's drawing of the week, and digital stage now, guys, because we finished the paper version yesterday and that was coloured in with the Copic markers and all of that. So don't forget to go and tune in to that one to find out how I did all of that and got that one finished. But today we are going to get on with something. We're going to get on with this one here because we're going to be doing the construction lines today. So we need to turn down the opacity on this one all the way to the, so about 50%. I've got 51, but don't worry about that. About 50%, and then we'll add another layer on top of that, add another layer on top of that, and add another layer on top of that. And then layer 2, we'll call that one construction lines. Construction 1, and then we'll have the color on the next video. Micro color. So we'll have color in the back in the next video, guys, because this one is all about the construction lines, and then the next one after that will be the textures and shade. Don't forget to tune in for that one. Those color and shading will be recorded, guys, because you will not be able to see what I'm doing here on the but you will be able to see the construction lines. So that is what we're going to be doing today. Again, guys, if you're new to the channel, my name's Blut084, BLUT084 Art and Games. I'm here every single day on YouTube, occasionally on Mixer, playing a few games, which I will upload it to the YouTube channel. So don't forget to hit subscribe and head over to Instagram, where I'm also there every single day to chat and to show you what else is going on throughout this YouTube thing. I tell you what's coming up, and if you are new subscriber, then you'll start to get the pings to tell you when I'm going live or when I'm going live and what's coming up in the what's coming up section of this YouTube. You have to hit the bell, so don't forget to hit that bell so you know when this will go live. But we are live right now, and live every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday as well to do some artwork and get drawing. You can always join me, or you can always watch back and see how well we got on. You can also vote on Sundays. There will be another vote this Sunday to ask you guys, what do you want? Done something here and I don't know what. Oh no. Okay. So we're going to be using the tools down here, digitizing, and we'll be listening to the Phoenix Saga story once more. If you are a fan of the X-Men, let me know in the comment section, and if I don't see your comment straight away because I have to do this, then I do apologize, but I will keep checking. I think I might have my tablet open so I can see you guys chatting to me. But we are going to be doing construction lines. It will take me a while, so be prepared for a long video. But you can listen along to the Comics Explained Phoenix Saga. So don't forget to ask me in the comments if you want a link live, or I'll leave one down below afterwards.
Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so as promised, we are getting into Dark Phoenix in time for the movie's release. So again, like what we talked about in the previous video when we covered the Phoenix Saga, is that there are some things that take place between the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas. But the weird thing is that it's kind of hit and miss, right? Like it's the nature of the beast. And so because of that, we're actually going to kind of go back and hit on some of the finer points before, I guess, as we go through this story, or at least the first part of it. And then we'll kind of pick up with the Grand Poobah events and the arrival of the Dark Phoenix and all that kind of good stuff. So initially, really when it comes to Dark Phoenix Saga, this runs between Uncanny X-Men issues 129 and 138. But the brunt of all the stuff really kind of happens in the later bit. And so with this beginning part right here, we initially pick up with like Banshee and Cyclops and Jean, as well as Moira McTaggart. Now, there were a couple of things that went on here. and really a couple reasons why this is being done the way that it is. So Banshee, as we know, is Sean Cassidy. He basically has the ability to emit kind of a sonic scream, not really on the same level as Black Bolt of the Inhumans. His scream can do anything between shatter rocks and allow him to fly to shatter mountains and things like that. But it's by no means like planet destroying. But the idea behind this is that really in a couple issues running up to this, we ended up dealing with a villain named Proteus. Now, Proteus is Kevin McTaggart, who's actually the son of a guy named Joe and Maura McTaggart herself. The way this played out was that Kevin's powers really has the power to manipulate reality, but only on a limited space. So imagine if like Franklin Richards of the Fantastic Four, the son of Reed Richards, could only manipulate reality within like a 1 mile sphere of himself or something like that. That's basically what Proteus did. He can do anything, but just within that limited space. But because his powers are so extreme, and because his power, nobody really knew how to handle him, he was essentially kind of locked away for a time. Now, this ended up resulting in like some crazy pirate guy, some boat guy who was a dick, who just had problems with Maura McTaggart, showing up on the doorstep and like breaking into their home. And then as soon as that happened, he ended up freeing Proteus by accident, and then Proteus basically took over the guy's body, right? Because when it comes to Kevin, because his powers are so extreme, the human body can't handle them. Now, this is something I want to talk about for a second, because this is not something you really see anymore in Marvel Comics. Back in the 1970s, 80s, and even in the early 90s, you had such a thing as powers that were
called
so
Crypto as well, guys. If you want to get it for yourself, there should be a link in the description.
A writer to essentially create
it is basically
Photoshop, kind of transcend them from the human element, and then move them into a much bigger
not
thing.
next tools, just not all the up-to-date tools with the smearing tools and things like that. You've got pretty much every other tool, which I'll be going through videos. So if you want to find out what they are, then you get to keep watching, or watch another video. Every video I explain what I'm using and how I'm doing it.
Now, ultimately, because of the fact that he has these sort of energy bonds, more or less, metal disrupts that. And so it eventually came down to like Colossus, along with a couple X-Men, who ended up defeating him, and it was believed he was dead. Now, he's not, but at the time this story was being written, it's believed that Proteus was dead. And so what this did is it allowed Chris Claremont to kind of write out Banshee and Maura McTaggart, not in the sense you'll never see them again, but at the same time this was going on, you had Black Tom Cassidy, who's related to Banshee, and was actually raising Teresa, Siren, who's the daughter of Banshee. And so because of that, it kind of allowed Claremont to sort of go into that story arc and keep the two of them somewhat removed. I mean, again, Banshee was kind of hit and miss, but Maura McTaggart would also kind of tie into like the New Mutants and all that kind of good stuff. So again, there was a lot leading up to this in terms of what came out of the Phoenix Saga and the Dark Phoenix Saga. Now, this is when we really start getting into the Dark Phoenix and in the events that lead up to that, when the X-Men are just kind of taking off and heading back to the X-Men mansion, and then suddenly Jean Grey is basically psychically assaulted by not really assaulted, but like psychically bombarded by Jason Wingard. Now, Jason Wingard is not new here. Jason Wingard has been around for a long, long time. In fact, he was part of Magneto's original Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which faced off against the X-Men in issue number 4, I think it was, by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And so when this happens, Jason Wingard has found success as part of a group called the Hellfire Club. Now, the Hellfire Club exists in two forms. You have the Hellfire Club itself, and then you have the Inner Circle. The actual Hellfire Club is more of a front, right? Like they're just a super wealthy, well-to-do organization. But the Inner Circle basically exists to just kind of collect power as much as they can, as much power as they can, right? So like they influence governments, they influence companies. The only company they haven't really been able to gain a foothold in, I think, is Roxxon Oil. But outside of that, they influence almost everybody. But when it was realized by Emma Frost, who we'll actually pick up with here in a minute, but when it was realized by her that Jean Grey was the Phoenix and possessed an insane amount of power, then it became, we can bend her to our will. And so because Jason Wingard has the power to manipulate the five senses and make you believe that everything that you're seeing, touching, tasting, hearing, and smelling is absolutely real, then what they could do is use him as a means to ensnare Jean Grey. The problem with this is you're talking about a being with the power of a god, right? So it's like if Jason Wingard tried to use his powers on Galactus. By himself, it wouldn't work. And so a device was created by Emma Frost that would basically amplify the power of Jason Wingard and would in turn allow him to ensnare Jean. And that's what happens. Now, this is one of the big things that kind of comes out of this, is it's little bit by little bit, right? If he had just like full-on psychically assaulted Jean, then like it wouldn't work, right? Because she would have immediately picked up that something was wrong, and then it would have just, it all would have gone belly up to the Hellfire Club. Instead, it's bit by bit. It's small moment here, small moment there. It's these little glimpses, right? Like these small little moments where Jason Wingard will basically like trick her mind into believing that she's on like a Victorian era ship, and like the two of them are lovers, and like Cyclops is just some goofball who's trying to get in the way, and like that's it. And for her, she believes it's 100% true. Now, there's two forces operating here, right? I mean, there's two forces that are going on here. The first, of course, is Jean herself, who's easily ensnared, but the second is the Phoenix, who could block all that from Jean, but is curious. And so that's why these things really work in conjunction with what it is that Jason Wingard's trying to do. And so again, that's when we start to pick up with like the introduction of Kitty Pryde, which again, is kind of a small little thing. And that's the nature of Claremont's stories, right? I mean, Kitty Pryde kind of gets introduced here and she's brought into the X-Men. But that's basically it. It's just kind of like, here's a future member of the team. That's the way Claremont did things, right? Claremont would introduce a character and then give them a huge moment, right? Where Kitty Pryde gets introduced here in like 3 issues after the events of Dark Phoenix Saga, Days of Future Past kicks out. So she immediately gets a great big huge role in Days of Future Past. So it goes on to show that she will become a significant member of the X-Men. That's how Claremont did things. So with this particular event, of course, she's being recruited by both Emma Frost as part of the Massachusetts Academy, and then Xavier is part of the School for Gifted Youngsters. Now, with Emma Frost and the Massachusetts Academy, that will eventually become home to the Hellions, which is basically Emma Frost's own variation of like the New Mutants / X-Men, kind of an amalgamation of those. Eventually, all the Hellions will be massacred, and then she'll end up leading and becoming a good guy. But at the outset here in this moment, she's kind of a rival to a degree to Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, but she's really raising like villains more so than she's like raising criminals or raising heroes, if that makes any sense. But it's just one of the many things that kind of went into Claremont writing, that like there's a lot of things kind of going on here. And so what this does is it leads to Emma Frost and the Hellfire Club basically going through and capturing the X-Men, and they managed to pull it off quite readily. Now, that's another important thing to bear in mind, is that with the Hellfire Club, they almost never go into anything blind, right? They almost never go in having no idea what's going on or how to win. And so with Emma Frost leading the charge as like one of the most powerful telepaths in the world, and depending on what story arc you're reading, sometimes more powerful than Charles Xavier, we saw that in Civil War. The idea behind this is that like using all the information they have on how the X-Men work and how they function, they end up taking Colossus, Storm, and Wolverine. Now, of course, again, this leaves an opening for Kitty Pryde to basically join in and kind of say, hey, look, I can help rescue the X-Men and prove my worth. But again, it's kind of bouncing back and forth here. Small little moments here and there, little tidbits. And so getting a bit of a reprieve, this is when things really start to get interesting, is getting a bit of a reprieve and kind of going on and doing a bit to sort of spend time among themselves, as well as investigate what's basically the Hellfire Club. You end up having Jean Grey and Scott Summers who go to a local bar, or a local disco, as it's called, which is actually the headlining act is Dazzler, which is kind of interesting. She can manipulate light, basically. But with the two of them going through there, of course, they're immediately bombarded by Jason Wingard again. At least Jean is. And so with this kind of going down, this whole scenario plays out where like Jason Wingard shows up and says, hey, like we remember each other. We were lovers, all that kind of good stuff. And kind of again being teleported back into the moment, Jean Grey just sort of says, yeah, like I remember you. We're definitely lovers. And the two of them actually end up getting married. And she basically kind of goes forward as what seems to sort of be this villainous version of herself. Or at least Jason Wingard kind of pulls her in and sends her that direction. Now, that's the motivation of Wingard, right? I mean, we kind of haven't made that clear at this moment. That's the motivation of Wingard. That in the mind of Jason, everybody kind of has the devil inside them, right? It's the aspect of themselves that's looking to cut loose and just sort of break all the rules, right? I mean, it's bad boys and bad girls. They kind of realize that some rules can be bent, others can be broken, to quote the Matrix. With this being the case, with Jason Wingard preying on Jean, what he's looking to do is unlock the darker side of it, right? The part that just kind of wants to spin out and just do whatever it is that she wants to do, because then what the Hellfire Club can do is indulge those desires, which, to create, havoc and to tear down worlds, whatever it is they want to do, they can use her as a means to kind of take over the world, more or less. The problem with this is that, again, where she's having a mental flashback, keep in mind that it's only her mind that's experiencing this. She's not physically being transported into the past to a Victorian era landscape. And so in this moment where Jason Wingard's there and he goes to kiss Jean, she does it in front of Cyclops. And that's when Cyclops begins to realize, okay, something's actually wrong here. Now, of course, Cyclops doesn't necessarily bail out on her, although he's very close to doing it. But at the time that all begins to happen, of course, the Hellfire Club makes their move, attacking Jean, attacking Cyclops, and Dazzler as well. Now, again, Dazzler's introduction here is just kind of, hey, look, I can manipulate lights and stuff like that. I don't know that I'm a mutant. They basically, Cyclops says, yes, you are, and you have these powers. You should come hang out with us, and so on and so forth. It all kind of wraps up pretty fast, right? Like it's not super intense. But again, focusing on Jean, focusing on the Hellfire Club, that's when they begin to kind of ask the question, okay, what's going on here? Like what's happening with Jean? And it's kind of interesting because Jean doesn't necessarily tell Cyclops what's going on. And that's kind of interesting here, right? Because what Jean is experiencing is what's essentially an affair, right? I mean, like what kind of goes on here is actually almost what went on, or almost identical to what went on with Grant Morrison's new X-Men, right? Where like Cyclops engages in a psychic affair with Emma Frost, and the two of them actually sleep together in Cyclops' mind when Jean Grey kind of walks in. But in this particular situation, she's not telling it. Like she's not like, yeah, there's this guy who's like psychically assaulting my mind and like tricking me into believing that I'm in like, a Victorian era landscape or something like that. Because not even Jean fully realizes what she's going on. And there's actually kind of an emotional attachment there, right? Like what Jean's basically doing is she spent her whole life with like the Boy Scout, right? The guy who never breaks the rules, always does the right thing, so on and so forth. And that's cool, I guess. But then now she's basically got kind of like this bad boy in her life, right? Like I can take you away from like this boring life that you live and bring you into something better. And she kind of wants to take it. But again, it's one part Jean who's sort of swept up in this emotional turmoil, and then it's the Phoenix that's sort of feeding on it, right? So even if Jean wanted to walk away, she probably couldn't. Now, of course, you've also got Emma Frost, who's basically defeating, who's captured the other X-Men. And then you've got, Kitty Pryde, who kind of sneaks in and basically frees like Wolverine, which in turn goes through and allows Wolverine to free everybody else. And then you have the rest of the X-Men who arrive on the scene, all of whom end up, doing battle with Emma Frost. But this is kind of cool because this is really where Jean begins to shift. Right? This is where she begins to move away from the superhero that we knew her as and starts to kind of lightly indulge in her darker side, which basically confirms to Jason Wingard that what he's doing is working. She ends up getting into a psychic battle of sorts with Emma Frost. And where the other X-Men are freeing each other and they're trying to make her escape and so on and so forth, Jean actually kind of all out assaults Emma and almost like destroys her mind in the process. Now, under normal circumstances and coming out of the Phoenix Saga, when that event ended and Jean realized the full totality of the power she possessed and what she could do with it, she put these blocks in place, right? She's like, okay, there's a huge amount of power here, but I'm going to restrain myself so that I never lose control, because if I do, God only knows what could happen. I could wipe out the Earth and the entire solar system, presumably the entire galaxy. I'm in possession of an infinite source of power from like across the omniverse. So like I can't just let things go and do whatever it is that I want to do. But in this moment, in this fight with Emma, Jean doesn't care. She just lets loose. And when that happens, like it almost completely eradicates and kills Emma Frost. And that's one of the things that Cyclops picks up on. He starts talking to Storm and he's like, hey, look, I don't know if you noticed, but like with Jean Grey, she is pretty dangerous now. Like she's really kind of snapping and losing control, and we have to be aware of what's going on. And so in response to this, and really kind of as a follow-up, the X-Men begin investigating the Hellfire Club, right? They kind of go in there and say, okay, we have to figure out what's happening. And it's kind of a funny moment here, right? Because like as soon as they get in there, Jason Wingard strikes again. And when that happens, like Jean Grey is totally ensnared, right? Like it's the last big leap, right? It's the last thing. Jean Grey is now no longer in a mindset where she's in love with Cyclops. She's totally ensnared by Jason Wingard. Now she sees Jason Wingard as he wants to be seen. And so when he ends up leading her away, it's kind of crazy because like he ends up taking her upstairs. And it's like, okay, Cyclops. So like some guy basically just like grabbed your girl and she's going upstairs with him. Now you got one of two choices, man. You can be a punk and just be like, well, I mean, I guess you really likes him, or you can go up there and get your girl. And that's exactly what you need to do, man. You're gonna let another man walk off with your woman, then you didn't deserve to have her in the first place, man. You gotta fight for the things you love, folks. Sometimes you get beat up, sometimes you get a black eye, sometimes you get all kinds of messed up. But you just fight for the things that you care for. Fight for the things that matter to you. And Cyclops does. The problem is that Cyclops is a punk. No, he's not. But actually, the problem is that Cyclops is facing the power of a god. That's the problem that Cyclops has. And so like when he goes running up on Jean, she completely blasts him with like a huge portion of the Phoenix's energy. Now, not enough to kill him, right? But like at this moment, it's when the rest of the Hellfire Club make their move, right? Because the X-Men respond, the Hellfire Club respond back. And that's when we start to get like these really cool explanations on what the various members can do. So beginning with Sebastian Shaw. Sebastian Shaw is a guy who can essentially absorb an unlimited amount of energy, kinetic, or I guess, really any kind of energy, and then like channel it into like physical strength, right? So for those of you guys who remember Nox from Heroes, the Black Guy, think of him, except instead of fear, he can absorb just like, physical energy, right? So like physical punches, blasts it on powerful enough to like destroy his physical body, and it turns into physical strength. It amps him up. And so really it's very difficult to destroy. He would take somebody with an extreme level of power to destroy Sebastian Shaw. Again, it's only physical strength. Like what you saw in X-Men First Class, I think it was, with the Kevin Bacon Sebastian Shaw, that was just Fox screwing things up, which they're really known for doing. But what you also have here is you got a guy by the name of Donald Pierce. Now, a lot of you guys know the name from the Logan film, the guy who was basically responsible, or at least had a hand in creating like X-23, and who was chasing after her and Wolverine and so on. Donald Pierce eventually goes on to join the Reavers, but what none of the members of the Hellfire Club know right now is that while Donald Pierce is part of the Hellfire Club and they are essentially mutants, Donald Pierce hates mutants. And he's actually using the Hellfire Club as a means to try to like push his own agenda, acquire power unto himself, so he can launch a campaign to kill mutants wherever he can find them. Now, of course, ultimately it doesn't work, and Donald Pierce, being half machine, is cast out and then eventually joins the Reavers, where he's really been ever since. Those of you guys who are reading the current X-Men run, that's really where that comes from, is it really kind of starts here. But then you also have Harry Leland. And I always felt like Harry Leland was one of the most underestimated estimated members of the Hellfire Club, if not one of the most underestimated characters of Marvel, right? Like, I mean, he was so cool, and no one after Claremont really to do anything. So what Harry Leland can do is he can actually increase the mass or decrease the mass of an object around him, right? So like he can make Wolverine weigh tons, right? So he's like Graviton to a degree, but he can make Wolverine weigh tons, right? So like, you know, Harry Leland against the Incredible Hulk, depending on what happens, you might see it play out the exact same way you saw Graviton and the Incredible Hulk face off against each other in the Avengers cartoon show, right? Where like Graviton just starts increasing the gravitational pull around the Incredible Hulk. Instead, what Leland does is he would increase the Hulk's mass, right? So if Bruce Banner turns into the Hulk and he weighs 600 pounds, Leland can come along and say, actually, you weigh 5,000 pounds now, and just increases his mass to an extreme degree, which is actually kind of a cool fight. But you guys understand why Leland was painfully underestimated in Marvel, and he was painfully underused. It was terrible. He would make such a great character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Like, imagine the characters of the MCU all end up showing up to the Hellfire Club, and like suddenly none of them can move, and like they all weigh thousands of pounds. They weigh so much that actually they begin to just kind of crush under their own weight. That's what Leland can do. Like, that's why he's so awesome. But again, the X-Men are pretty much taken apart quick, fast, and in a hurry by the Hellfire Club. The only exception is Wolverine. This is something I want you guys to notice too, because this is the cool thing about Claremont writing, is that when Wolverine fights Leland, he's basically just like made to weigh a ton of weight and then starts crashing through the building down into the sewer systems, and then Leland walks away. That's the way Claremont would do things. And that's cool because you don't see that in story arcs now, right? Like Wolverine would show back up again and fight Leland, and then like they would win all in the same story. Claremont actually extends that to the next issue and says, okay, so like Wolverine's defeated right now, but like he's gonna come back, and Wolverine by himself is gonna go rescue Jean Grey. Now, at the outset, and just kind of looking at this, it's just kind of like, okay, so Wolverine's fighting by himself, whatever. But Wolverine's fighting for love, and that's one of the cool things that Claremont had built up. That's one of the reasons why his writing always paid off, is because with Wolverine basically going back and intending
the dog's just puked right next to the cameras. That's really nice of her. I'm going to clear that up a minute. Yeah, carry on listening, guys.
Going there mainly to rescue her, but to also rescue the other members of the X-Men. Now, the other part of this is that it really kind of shows this perception of Jean in terms of how it's viewed from the mind of Jason, or from her mind by virtue of Jason Wingard. Is that where the X-Men are just kind of tied up and they have these inhibitor belts around them and they can't use their powers or anything like that, and they're standing in like a modern day room. In the perception of Jean's mind, they're criminals. Now, they're basically, you know, people that tried to break in, they tried to take what belonged to her, you know, and they have to be dealt with and so on and so forth. Her whole vision is skewed. And again, that's the nature of Jason Wingard. Now, a person who's a telepath like Charles Xavier, or a person like Jean Grey, who wouldn't be in such a fractured mindset right now, would normally be able to oversee this, would normally be able to like realize what's going on. Now, if this was like Charles Xavier, and Charles Xavier walked in on this, he would be like, what is going on here? He would use his powers and be like, Jean, you have to see, this is the way, you know, it's not really the way things are. You know, and that would basically be it. But with Jean Grey's mind being fractured, with like the Phoenix really sort of just like absorbing and taking in all these emotional feelings, Jean Grey never had a chance. And so that's kind of the cool thing, is because in this moment, in this fraction of a second, where she's basically almost totally ensnared by Jason Wingard, this fraction of herself, this tiny itty bitty version of herself, which is still kind of maintaining this psychic connection with Cyclops, manages to send a signal to his brain and say, hey, like, I'm still here. I can't do anything. I'm totally ensnared. Like, there's nothing I can really do here. I'm almost totally ensnared. I can't escape from this, but you can. And in that moment, what ends up happening is the lock or whatever it is on Cyclops' neck essentially snaps. Now, this is kind of the cool thing about that, is that when it snaps and when it breaks, it essentially frees Cyclops. Right, like it basically allows Cyclops to go free. But this is the important thing, and this is why this happens. And it's one of the most important moments throughout the entirety of the story. With Cyclops being held captive, Jean Grey for the most part doesn't care, because it's just, this is the guy that's there. It doesn't really matter. But remember, ever since the two of them first met, and really Claremont built on this, is that there's a kind of psychic bond between Jean Grey and Cyclops that nobody else has. So like no matter what happens to the other, they are always aware of what's going on with the other person. It's really kind of forged in their love, right? Like they'll always know what's going on. They can sense when something's off. Jean Grey doesn't even have to use her powers to know. She doesn't have to use her powers to know there's something wrong with Cyclops. The connection really kind of tells her. The psychic bond weakens, or like it begins to kind of fracture a little bit when he starts to get distant. That's when we kind of know that things are wrong, that something's not working the way it's supposed to. And so with this little bit of a moment,
sorry about that, guys.
The reason why this works out for Cyclops, the reason why the lock on his neck snaps is because the Phoenix incapacitating Cyclops. And
she does it every now and then, which was tension.
Or at least Jason Wingard using his powers to make Jean believe that Cyclops has been killed. This is the breaking point, because what Jean Grey is experiencing now is basically the feeling of loss. losing the best thing she ever knew, the one man she's in love with among every other man in existence. The Phoenix has never felt this before. The Phoenix doesn't know what it's like to experience the loss of a loved one, someone you're hopelessly in love with. The Phoenix has never experienced that. There's a lot of emotions the Phoenix hasn't experienced, at least at the time this story was written. Now, future stories came later on down the line. They kind of went back and changed a lot of this by introducing new things, right? Like the Phoenix was in love with Odin and so on and so forth. But at the time this story is being written, the information that we had, the Phoenix had never experienced any of these things before. And so what's happened here is the Phoenix is kind of one with Jean Grey, right? Like Jean Grey feels love, the Phoenix feels love. Jean Grey's in love with Cyclops, the Phoenix is in love with Cyclops. You know, Jean Grey likes the X-Men, the Phoenix likes the X-Men. You know, Cyclops dies, the Phoenix feels the power of losing someone she loves, and the Phoenix snaps. She just loses her mind. Like she literally breaks. And that's when all hell begins to break loose. Because as soon as that happens, the Phoenix immediately turns on Jason Wingard and says, like, I see what you've been doing now. Like, I get this ruse that you've been playing. You've been manipulating me. You've been lying to me. You've been cheating me. Like, you've been tricking me into seeing things that aren't really there. So if what you want, Jason Wingard, is to experience the power of a god, then I will give it to you in its full totality. And so the Dark Phoenix runs up on Jason Wingard and basically gives him cosmic awareness. In the blink of an eye, he sees the entirety of all things in existence, all throughout the infinite expanse of all space and time. He sees it all at once. And because of that, because he's not prepared for it, it's totally overwhelming. Now, here's the important thing to bear in mind here, is people will look at that and they'll say, yeah, well, like Quasar Wendell Vaughn got that and it wasn't overwhelming, you know, and like Phyla Vell, she became like the new Quasar and that wasn't overwhelming. Captain Marvel got that and it wasn't overwhelming. But because Marvel's usually very particular about who gets it, right? So it's usually like a slow build up to experiencing that. So that kind of level of like cosmic awareness and being aware of what's going on in all things at the same time. You know, either that or it's someone who kind of like eases them into it, right? Like when Wendell Vaughn got that, he was eased into it by the cosmic entity Eon, right? He was just kind of like, okay, so like, just so you know, what you're about to see is going to be some crazy stuff. So just like breathe and like everything will be okay, but like you're about to see the whole universe. Bam, you know, and then we just like throw it on him. But you know, for this situation, Jason Wingard has never experienced anything like that. So he's blasted with all existence at the same time, which overwhelms him and actually sends him into a catatonic state where he will remain for quite some time. And so in the moment, you know, kind of in the aftermath of this, the rest of the X-Men basically band together. They manage to make their escape from the Hellfire Club. Everything seems okay. And then the Dark Phoenix manifests. The Dark Phoenix is totally overwhelmed by everything she's been experiencing. And it says, like, Jean Grey is gone now. There is no Jean Grey. There's none of that stuff. I am the Dark Phoenix, and all of you are going to die. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comments Explain, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Raw Report. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.
Peace. Let's get some more. It's fine. So now I can show you what I actually do, what I listen to, and what I'm watching sometimes in the afternoons, just to get some ideas a lot of the time, or just to see what's good in the comics. I go to Comic Story or I go to Comics Explained. I'm going to listen to some more Phoenix, and I might even listen to the MCU Explained. Shall we have a look? I don't know. Let's have some more Dark Phoenix. Oh, I can't wait till this comes out.
Hello, Seth.
You'll get a proper review there, guys.
If you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so picking back up with the Dark Phoenix saga, this is essentially the conclusion. Because remember, when it comes to the Dark Phoenix saga, you can actually kind of skim through the first part. I mean, we didn't necessarily do that, but you can kind of skim through the first part and then pick up with like when Jean Grey finally emerges as the Dark Phoenix. So that's basically what's happening right now, right? Like, I mean, in the last video, we talked about how with Jean Grey basically succumbing to the power of the Dark Phoenix during the whole fight with like Sebastian Shaw and the Hellfire Club and the belief that Cyclops was dead. This has kind of released this huge amount of unbridled power that the Phoenix Force had. Now, again, this isn't something that came out of nowhere, right? And it's one of the things that kind of tapped into the nature of Chris Claremont's storytelling, that the Phoenix Force is this cosmic entity that existed out there. And at the time this story was written, there wasn't a whole lot of information about it. Now, again, like one of the things we said in the last video was that because the Phoenix proved to be so popular, that Marvel followed up with like a series of stories that kind of focus on the in-between periods, right? Like when the Phoenix first popped up, when the universe was created, when the multiverse came into existence, when the Phoenix first began to investigate the existing universe, and then in turn its various escapades and adventures with future characters. And he was even like Chris Claremont who did that, right? I mean, we saw that in like the old Excalibur stories, and we saw that in like Bizarre Adventures and so on and so forth. That with the Phoenix being as popular as it was like we want to see more of it. And so again, Marvel basically obliged, because why wouldn't you? But at the time that this story was made, the Phoenix Force, being this cosmic entity that didn't really seem to have very many dealings with sentient beings, was essentially experiencing like powerful emotions all at the same time. And that was a difference, right? When Jean Grey was kind of in a subtle mindset and she was just kind of relaxed, the Phoenix didn't really experience anything like raw, powerful emotions. But love, hate, rage, those are powerful, and they can oftentimes be overwhelming, right? I mean, for us people, it's just an overwhelming series of emotions. And the reason why we cry is because our body doesn't really seem to know how to handle it. And so in response to this, the Phoenix was overwhelmed by like the feeling of grief, the perception that Cyclops was killed, and in its feeling of grief manifested and basically went crazy. With that came like the feeling of love that matched the feeling of grief, like I lost this man that I love more than anything. Like all those kind of raw emotions really just poured into the Phoenix, and it was experiencing them all for the first time. So it'd be like if you were granted cosmic awareness all of a sudden, right? It would overwhelm you. It would probably send your mind into absolute chaos, and you'd probably go into a catatonic state like Mastermind did. But the fact remains that with Phoenix essentially going crazy, essentially seizing control of Jean and then becoming mad, the first thing it does is attack the X-Men. Of course, the X-Men rally and try to fight as best they can, but that's one of the things to focus on here, is that you get this sort of conflict, and the X-Men basically don't really stand much of a chance. And it was Chris Claremont's way of basically showing, like, look how grandiose the power is in comparison to the X-Men. Now, by and large, when you look at the way this is drawn, and you look at the way that it's written, it's not like crazy, right? It's not that the Phoenix just like waves her hand and they all go pushing down. And that was the nature of Claremont storytelling. There is such a thing, and really depending how you do comics, I personally like the more grandiose power and scale, like Infinity Gauntlet, Thanos snaps his fingers and half the life in the universe just vanishes, just blinks out of existence. To me, I like that kind of grandiose scale, that grandiose display of power. But in this instance, and when Chris Claremont used to tell the stories, the characters were for the most part tangible, right? So like Jean Grey with this sustained amount of power, we didn't really know how far it went. And in fact, there'll be other characters who will basically tell us. But in the moment, the fight that she has between the X-Men is her versus them. And so we're not really dealing with like ultra powerful characters. It'd be different if it was like the Molecule Man. Right, the Molecule Man pops up. At the time, his powers weren't really what they were. That didn't come until 1984 with Secret Wars. And so this story was written in like 1980, like 1979, 1980. And so you haven't really gotten to that point yet. But like if the Molecule Man stepped in, knowing what his power set is, it'd be a crazy display of his abilities. But in the moment right now, you've got a guy who can shoot concussive blasts, you've got a guy who can teleport, a guy who can cover himself with an osmium metal, which is kind of a mixture of different metals, although we don't really know the basis behind it. You got guys who, under normal circumstances, wouldn't be able to match the power of the Phoenix in the first place. So again, it's kind of a cool thing, depending on how you look at it. It's a little lackluster, or it's kind of a cool display. But what seems to be lackluster in this part of the story is made up for, here in a little bit. And so when the Phoenix takes off and leaves for space, one of the things that Claremont does is really kind of hit on the various other characters, right? In this day and age of Marvel Comics, if you've seen an event unfold with like an X-Man or something like that, you don't really see a lot of references to other characters. You don't really see that many references to the Avengers or to the Fantastic Four or to S.H.I.E.L.D. or something like that, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man. You don't really see those kind of references. Just because of the fact that the story is told from the perspective of the X-Men more often than not. But one of the things that made Claremont writing so cool is you would see these small references here and there. Unless Marvel's writing a crossover event like Avengers versus X-Men or something like that, where the two teams are intentionally teaming up, you don't see a whole lot of crossover. That's one of the reasons why, with regards to the current run of Uncanny X-Men before Jonathan Hickman takes over, that it's actually kind of a cool little thing to see Steve Rogers show up to Cyclops and say, hey man, your tactics are pretty heavy-handed. It's kind of a cool little bit of a crossover because it's not something you see very often. But in this instance, with the Phoenix taking off into space, everybody picks up on this. Right? The Fantastic Four are just like, okay, so there's somebody here whose power rivals that of Galactus, and it's just kind of an immediate censor, right? Like people will point to that and say, see, Marvel confirms that's true. And if you go strictly by words, sure, which is usually what I do, right? So I mean, at the time the story is being written, yes, the Phoenix appears to be equal to Galactus in power just by virtue of what we're being told. Given all the subsequent information we have, we know the Phoenix exceeds Galactus in power. But then you have Spider-Man, who's just like, whatever that thing is, it's tripping my spider sense. Doctor Strange is just like, wow. I mean, it's cool. And then, of course, the Silver Surfer kind of gets in and, kind of looks at everything and is like, this is kind of bonkers, this is kind of crazy, which actually I believe is covered in the time in the old Epic Illustrator comics. I don't know if that actually happens. And if it does, then it'd probably be worth exploring in like a future video, the next video we do or something like that. But at the moment, the Phoenix just kind of takes off, flies all the way across the cosmos, and then destroys this star that belongs to a group called the Badari. Now, the Badari are, for the most part, just kind of a race in this star system, but with the death of this star comes the entire annihilation of their race with the destruction of world. And so when this happens, the Shi'ar are essentially monitoring everything. Now, I want to talk about this for a second, right? I'm not going to leave you guys hanging on information about the Shi'ar. Just be like, and the Shi'ar are seeing it, moving on. Like, I'm not going to do that to you guys. So when it comes to Marvel Comics and when it comes to various alien races, you guys are probably familiar with the Kree if you've seen Captain Marvel. You're probably familiar with the Skrulls if you've seen the movie as well, although they didn't go really in depth into them. Those are for the most part what we call singular empires, meaning they're an empire composed of a singular race, right? So no matter how many planets make up the entire empire of the Kree or the Skrulls, they're all either housed by their own individual race or subjugated by that race. And that's basically it, right? Like the race controls them. And that's all there is to it. With the Shi'ar Empire, it's a little more benign in reality. The Shi'ar Empire is this empire that's composed of a bunch of different races. Now, the main race is the actual Shi'ar race, right? Like they're basically avian in design. They look like birds, more or less. Wings on their arms and things like that. But what you also have under them are a whole host of other races. But as opposed to like subjugating them and saying like, you do what we tell you to, instead the Shi'ar work more along with them. And the reason why is because what this would do is allow the Shi'ar to become the most powerful empire in the entirety of the universe. Because instead of just relying on their own technology to make them, more powerful than they already are, instead they basically bring in other races, and then in a kind of symbiotic relationship where the Shi'ar give and the other race gives, the Shi'ar in turn expand the power of their empire by bringing in technology and weapons of other races. So it basically kind of bulks them up. It's greater than the sum of its parts, if that makes any sense. But with the Phoenix Force destroying that entire star, because the Bidari were part of the Shi'ar Empire, or at least allies of the Shi'ar Empire, this in turn triggers the Shi'ar, which this scout ship more or less tries to launch an attack and is immediately destroyed. And so what this does is it calls into attention the actions of Lalandra, which have to be vote, and essentially it leads to like this massive conflict. Now, with Lalandra, she's what's called the Magistress. Originally, she was the sister of Dakin, and Dakin, of course, was the main villain from the original Phoenix Saga. So issues 104 to 108 or whatever, Uncanny X-Men. You'll find the link to that video down in the description. But with this particular conflict, Lalandra has to act, right? Because like she's the new Magistress, she's the one running the Shi'ar Empire. And when it comes to the Phoenix, if you go back and you look at Uncanny X-Men issues 107, 108, and 109, one of the things that's kind of explained or kind of told to us here is that the Phoenix operates inside the White Room, right? Like this inside the Imcron crystal. And so with the Shi'ar essentially existing to protect the Imcron crystal, the Shi'ar exists to, on some level, protect the universe. But the problem with this is that with the Dark Phoenix being the threat that it is, the task of the Shi'ar to essentially like save the universe and to essentially like preserve its entire existence rests with destroying the Phoenix. Because the Phoenix is not really supposed to inhabit or take on the form of a physical and mortal human. Because if it did, this is exactly what would happen. And so kind of safeguarding the Phoenix at the same time, safeguarding the Imcron crystal, the Shi'ar Empire essentially like steps in and calls together a meeting of some of the most powerful entities, the Kree, the Skrulls, and the Shi'ar themselves, all basically have this discussion on what they're going to do with regards to the Phoenix. Now, before we get into that, I kind of want to step back for a second, and I want to talk about Jean Grey, I guess the Phoenix going back and visiting Jean Grey, or Jean Grey's home. And the reason for this is not necessarily for any real reason other than the fact that the Phoenix is curious, right? Because what the Phoenix is here in a lot of ways is like a child. It's one of the reasons why the Phoenix is referred to as the Star Child. It doesn't really understand what it's experiencing right now. It doesn't understand the concept of emotion. It doesn't understand the concept of love and hate and things like that. It doesn't grasp those things, or at least at the time the story was written, it didn't grasp those things. And so because of that, with it kind of experiencing this huge influx of emotions from Jean Grey, now it becomes curious. Well, what's this talk about parents? What are parents? Like, I don't understand what parents are. And so it travels back to her original home to kind of get a feel for her life. Now, at the same time, there is also an aspect of Jean that's kind of prevalent here, right? Like, Jean's essentially constantly fighting back against the Phoenix and trying to stop it from, like, seizing full control of her. And that's one of the reasons why Jean is a perfect host for it, because where the Phoenix can seize control of her, she can also kind of fight back to a degree, right? So it's one of those things of, if you show you've got some gumption, then you're worth being a host. So it's like the Phoenix testing Jean more or less. If you guys don't know what that is, well then, look it up sometime. But the fact remains that in this moment, with Jean Grey's telepathy being so sensitive, in the sense of like she's still not able to fully control it the way that she used to, the thoughts of her parents and her sister are like pouring into her mind. And as that happens, Jean begins to become overwhelmed because what they're experiencing is fear. On one side, they're kind of like, hey, I'm glad you're here. But on the other side, it's like, what's going on here? Why are you doing things like this? And so on and so forth. And so, of course, that leads to the X-Men intervening and essentially attaching like an inhibitor collar onto her head. Now, inhibitor collars are collars that are designed to shut down the powers of a person, right? So if you slap one around the neck of Gambit, he won't be able to use his powers at all. For this purpose, it's pretty much the same thing. It shuts down the psychic powers of Jean, her telepathy and telekinesis, but the Phoenix Force is still there. And so what it does is almost kind of temporarily eliminate the bond between the two. Now, of course, this is Jean and it's the Phoenix, which means that like the Phoenix is still somewhat in control here, allowing for, some measure of her powers. It's not complete, right? I mean, she's probably using like 10% of her powers, but still, like, I mean, she can still fly, she can still use some measure of telepathy and telekinesis. It's just not as expansive as it used to be. But again, this is Claremont kind of saying this is how powerful the Phoenix is. For anybody else, it would have shut their powers down, and that would have been the end of that, right? They would have just kind of been like, okay, you're defeated now, and they would have carted them off and done whatever they had to do. For the Phoenix, you're talking about a power that's so primordial and so extreme that not even something like this can shut those powers down in their entirety. And so where Wolverine goes to attack, or at least goes to subdue Jean, what you end up having is like Jean Grey herself, who manifests and says, hey, look, you have to kill me, you have to stop me. What's going on here is this internal battle between the Phoenix and Jean Grey. That Jean Grey will pop back up. She'll take control of her body for a very short amount of time, and then the Phoenix will take control back. And so in those little moments when Jean Grey is lucid, and when she's like, hey, like, somebody has to stop me, she begs Wolverine to kill her. Now, you saw this play out in X-Men Last Stand in one of the most terrible ways ever, but that's basically what was going on here. That Jean would kind of intervene every once in a while, take control of her body back, and the Phoenix would seize control again. And so as a result of this, you have Cyclops who steps in, and that's when things begin to change. Because remember, the rapport between Cyclops and Jean has always been a huge aspect of their characters, right? And Chris Claremont was nothing if not a guy who didn't focus on the interpersonal relationships between characters when he was writing the X-Men stories. And so what this is at its core level, absolute and unadulterated love between two characters. It's almost kind of like the statement, love conquers all. And that's what you end up having here. When Cyclops intervenes and starts talking to Jean and rationalizing with her, Jean actually takes control back for a little while. The love she feels for Cyclops allows her to overpower the Phoenix for a longer duration than normal. But yet again, the Phoenix takes control. And so what this leads to is a psychic battle between Charles Xavier and the Phoenix itself. Now, Charles Xavier ends up winning, but only because of the fact that Jean helped him. If this was a straight up battle between Xavier and the Phoenix, Xavier would have lost by a mile, because you're talking about what's essentially just pure psychic energy against a guy who can manipulate psychic energy, right? She can just overwhelm the mind of Xavier and just like destroy his brain, and he's just catatonic for the rest of his life. There are all kinds of circumstances where he could have lost. But because of the fact that Jean helped Xavier win this battle, what it does is it kind of locks away the Phoenix Force for some period of time. Now, it's kind of left to us in the moment right now to determine how long that time period is. But fortunately for us, it ends up being Claremont who actually tells us how long this goes for. And the reason why is because once the battle ends and it feels like the day is won, suddenly the X-Men are all teleported away. And the reason why is because they're all brought before Lilandra and this grand commission of the Shi'ar Empire, freeing the Skrulls. And what they basically say is, using, with the power of the Phoenix, what it's essentially done is by tapping into Jean Grey, the Phoenix has crossed a line that it can't come back from. The Phoenix knows love. The Phoenix knows hate. The Phoenix is supposed to be this impartial entity that knows neither of those. It doesn't know any kind of emotion. That it just kind of exists out there, and it represents the sum total of all life that has ever, currently does, and will ever exist. And it serves a fundamental purpose in the universe, right? It's like Galactus feeding on planets that he's only angry at, as opposed to Galactus feeding on planets across the board indiscriminately. And so with that being the case, they basically state the Phoenix has to die. Because with the Phoenix experiencing these emotions now, if it's allowed to run rampant, it'll just arbitrarily start destroying more systems because it can't. It'll be like a feral animal tasting blood, right? Like, it doesn't come back from that. It just kind of loses. I guess a better example is like a dog getting rabies. It's probably a better example of that, right? Like, it's fundamentally altered. It's changed, and there's no real way to bring it back. And so, of course, with that being the case, the X-Men essentially invoke trial by combat, right? Like, it's actually Xavier who basically points that out. He's like, hey, look, according to your all's laws and the way you function, we can basically like prove our case by trial by combat. And the terms are this: if we as the X-Men win, we decide what happens to Jean Grey and the Phoenix. If the X-Men lose, then you guys decide what happens to Jean Grey and the Phoenix. And so, of course, the approval is granted by the Kree, the Shi'ar, and the Skrulls, and the trial by combat begins the next day. Now, this entire battle takes place on the blue area of the moon. But before we get into that, one of the cool things that goes on here is we actually get this kind of moment where Claremont goes character by character and really kind of focuses on them as individuals, right? And again, Claremont was well known for this. Now, we don't need to go through each one, but basically all they're doing is kind of going through and recollecting on their own moments with Jean, the experiences they had in case they lose, but also the recognition of the fact that Jean Grey and all of them may die, right? Because this is a battle to the death. This is not a, I give up kind of thing. This is like, essentially, it's a trial, it's a battle to the death, is what it's supposed to be. And so when this happens, of course, Jean Grey puts on her classic Marvel Girl outfit from the original X-Men by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and then both groups, the Shi'ar Imperial Guard and the X-Men, are dropped off on the blue area of the moon. Now, talking about the Shi'ar Imperial Guard for a second, this is, when we had our little segment, we talked about the Shi'ar kind of working with
Shi'ar and such and things, and find out what happens to that video in the next one, guys. This has now come to an end. We've finished all the construction lines. We've put in what shading is needed, and I think that's going to call an end to today's stream. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Don't forget to click the links that will appear, And tune in next time for some colour and adding the light effect of the fiery phoenix. Thanks for watching, guys. My name is Bloop084. Again, click the links that will appear. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one, which will be recorded, so don't forget to tune in and find out what happens. Bye for now.